Alright, so I hope you liked that little montage there. That was shot exclusively on the Sony rx100 Mark VII. This is more of a photography camera than it is a video camera, but it does have video capabilities. Today I wanted to give you a real quick impression on this camera. I did review this camera maybe about a year and a half ago, and I found it to take great still pictures, but the video unfortunately has a couple limitations. So this thing does have a mic port, so you can plug in a microphone into this camera and it will give you better audio than using the internal microphone, but it has no place to mount the microphone on top. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to come up with some sort of cage or some sort of rig that you would have to use, like maybe a tripod coming off the bottom with a little arm coming off to be able to use a microphone on this camera. Now this camera is very small, it's compact, it can tuck right into your pocket. So if you're looking to use this thing for photo, this thing does an exceptional job. The downside is that when you use it for video, you really have to crank up the aperture or the shutter speed. It only goes to f11. It has no variable ND filters built into it. Unless you're gonna get an ND filter that attaches onto the front of it, which they do sell, I'll put links down in the description below, you're not gonna be able to get a very shallow depth of field on a nice sunny day. Now, as you get more towards twilight or even sunrise, you can use this camera a lot more when it comes to lower f-stops or correct shutter speed, because remember, correct shutter speed is the 180 rule, which is you're shooting in 24 frames per second, 1/50th shutter speed. Or if you're shooting in 120 frames per second, 1/250, which is actually what I shot that entire montage on, was 120. I did have to crank up the aperture in order to keep the shutter speed at 1/250. I was shooting in the standard picture profile, so you can let me know down in the comments below what you think of the colors coming out of this. It does offer S-Log and HLG, but unfortunately, without an ND filter, you're gonna be shooting at 800 ISO. That's gonna be way too bright for a nice sunny day. If you were shooting inside, 800 ISO could work because you're gonna have less light inside, so you can crank up the ISO. Now it does shoot in HLG 1, 2, and 3. What I did find is that the HL profiles do a great job and the ISO starts a little bit lower. So this camera might not be a great S-Log camera. So dynamic range wise, you're not gonna be able to really take advantage of that S-Log, but HLG 2, you can shoot with an ISO as low as 160. You could shoot this thing in HLG 2 and then overexpose about one stop. So between 0.7 and 1 stop is gonna get you good imagery. I'll go ahead and I'll put up some additional video shot in HLG versus standard picture profile, and you can let me know which one you think actually looks better. But as far as video camera performance goes, this camera can shoot in 24, 30 frames per second in 4K. It can also shoot in 60 and 120 when it comes to 1080p video. So as far as the little point and shoot camera goes, this thing is really a very nice camera, especially if you're gonna be out shooting photos. This is where this camera really shines. It's got the autofocus system of Sony's A9 II, so it's got one of the latest autofocusing systems. It's got the animal eye detect as well. It doesn't have the bird eye detect like the Sony A7 IV does. It does have dynamic range when you're shooting photos, so it's gonna try and preserve that dynamic range whenever possible. All in all, it's a nice little camera. It's got a little flip up flash here, which actually does a great job of really filling any flash situation. It's also got a viewfinder here, which is nice. It's tiny, but you can definitely usable in a pinch. But you're gonna mostly probably be relying on the back of the screen when either taking photos or video. Unfortunately, when you are shooting in 120 frames per second, you cannot crank up the monitor brightness. So it's a pretty sunny day. Unfortunately, at 120 frames per second, I cannot turn up the monitor brightness. Now, I was able to just borrow this camera for a 2-week period. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, go ahead and leave those down in the description. Just want to give you a real quick overview that definitely way better for photo. audio. If you are looking more for a dedicated video camera that is this size, you're gonna wanna look at the Sony ZV-1. That is a more dedicated photo camera. It's got a mic on top, so you don't need to have a dedicated shotgun mic. Where this camera, it's gonna be very difficult to get clean, consistent, good audio. You're really gonna have to crank up the volume on this. If you have any questions or concerns, go ahead, leave those down in the comments below. This has been a real quick overview on the Sony RX100 Mark VII. Really appreciate you stopping by. If you like this video, I'm sure you're gonna like the video on the screen now. It's about another camera for the Sony system. Before you leave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. See you in the next one.